Let's talk about what's currently happening in the United States, and it's serious. Foreign airlines are pulling out of the American market en masse. This isn't just a few canceled flights. It's a real exodus. Cities are seeing fewer tourists, airports are emptying out, and local businesses are losing revenue fast. America used to attract tourists, students, and visitors from around the globe. But now it seems people have simply stopped thinking about it. According to the July report, in March 2025 alone, the number of foreign visitors dropped by nearly 1.5%. The drop from Western Europe was a staggering 17%, and from Canada, the situation is even worse, down 20% in March, and by June, already at minus 40%. If this trend continues, by the end of the year, the flow of passengers from Canada could become so minimal that no airline will find it profitable to fly to the U.S. In fact, they've already begun pulling out. Imagine not being able to find a single flight from Canada to the U.S. Some regions, like the Caribbean, are also seeing sharp declines, with drops of up to 26%. In total, the U.S. could lose up to $29 billion in tourism revenue in 2025 alone. That's a devastating blow to an entire ecosystem, from hotels and restaurants to retail and tour operators. If you've been following the news, you won't be surprised. Much of this downturn is being blamed on Trump's policies. His hardline stance on immigration, trade disputes, and the America First agenda are making the country appear unfriendly and unwelcoming to the rest of the world. The world is losing interest in the U.S., and it's coming at a steep cost. So let's take a closer look at why this is such a worrying signal for America's future. The U.S. tourism industry is beginning to collapse. Airlines that spent years building routes into the U.S. are now pulling out one by one. Airports are empty, terminals are quiet, and small businesses are suffering. This isn't turbulence, it's a crash. The first warning signs came from Europe. Icelandic budget airline Play will stop all U.S. flights starting in October 2025. Routes to New York, Boston, and Baltimore all canceled. Air Canada is making similar cuts, dropping service to 5 major U.S. cities: Detroit, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Nashville, and Tampa. That's already a cut of 300,000 seats. Why? Simple, there's no demand. According to aviation authorities, forward bookings for flights between Canada and the U.S. for April 2025 have plummeted by 71% to 76% compared to last year. In March 2024, Canadians bought 1.22 million tickets for April. This year, just 295,000, a drop of nearly 76%. And when nobody's flying, routes get canceled fast. The summer flight schedule through October has already been slashed. Even during the peak months of July and August, bookings are down 4%. And it's not just airline data. Border entry data shows the number of Canadians entering the U.S. dropped by 12.5% in February, 18% in March, and 35% at land crossings in April, with nearly 20% fewer air travelers as well. Some may think this is temporary, but all signs point otherwise. In 2024, Canadians made up a quarter of all foreign visitors to the U.S., spending over $20 billion. Now they're disappearing fast. That's nearly half the amount Americans spent at McDonald's in the same period. Let that sink in. And Canada is just the beginning. According to Tourism Economics, the total number of international tourists is projected to decline by 15% in 2025. Canada may be the first domino, but it won't be the last. The losses already total $12.5 billion. Every 1% drop equals nearly $2 billion in lost revenue, and as many as 140,000 tourism jobs. In some border cities, business revenues have already fallen by 30%. It's even showing up in company forecasts. Air Canada has downgraded its financial outlook for 2025 from expected $3.5 to $3.8 billion, now down to just $3.2 to $3.6 billion. The reason? Weak demand for U.S. routes. And they're not alone. WestJet is canceling 9 routes, including Vancouver, Austin, and Calgary and New York. Flair Airlines is axing unprofitable U.S. routes like Toronto, Nashville, and Calgary, Las Vegas, and shifting those resources to Mexico, Jamaica, and domestic markets. Even smaller players like Air Transat are exiting the U.S. and pivoting toward Europe. The impact is also being felt within the U.S. United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby confirmed a steep drop in passenger traffic from Canada and announced cuts on those routes. Still think America doesn't need tourists? Consider this, the two biggest sporting events on the planet, the 2026 FIFA World Cup and the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles, are both set to take place in the United States. But if this trend continues, these events might be remembered not for triumphs, but for empty seats. So let's look ahead. How bad could this get? These events were meant to showcase American greatness to the world. But instead, they're turning into high-risk gambles in the middle of a tourism crisis. The United States has already invested billions of dollars modernizing airports, expanding hotels, and renovating stadiums, all in hopes of attracting millions of international visitors. But now, with traveler numbers falling and global sentiment toward the U.S. turning increasingly negative, those investments are hanging by a thread. Tourism experts, economists, and business leaders are sounding the alarm. They're now questioning whether America can even be a good host, and whether anyone will show up at all, thanks to Trump's hardline immigration policies, trade tariffs, and a growing global perception that the U.S. is no longer a welcoming destination. It's not just attendance that's at risk, it's the country's reputation and revenue from these major global events. According to estimates by the U.S. Travel Association, if the current trend continues, the country could lose up to $50 billion in tourism revenue. Experts are calling for immediate action to prevent a full-blown disaster. These events were supposed to be a showcase of America's strength and global leadership. Instead, Trump's policies, including tariffs, entry bans on 12 countries, and increasingly harsh rhetoric, are pushing the U.S. into isolation. And now we're seeing the hard numbers that reveal how more and more countries are choosing not to travel to the United States. Let's start with the first to turn away, Canada. It was a perfect storm of politics, economics, and public sentiment. Trump's America First agenda, including 25% tariffs on Canadian goods and offensive remarks like calling Canada the 51st state, sparked a fierce backlash. Former Prime Minister Trudeau urged Canadians to choose Canada, and current leader Mark Carney labeled the tariffs a direct economic attack. The result? A national Buy Canadian movement exploded. 91% of Canadians now want to reduce dependence on the U.S., and 85% already prefer domestic products. A Facebook group called Buy Canadian has grown to over 1.2 million supporters. Airlines are responding. Air Canada and WestJet are expanding flights to Paris, Rome, and Jamaica while cutting service to the U.S. This isn't a blip. It's a clear warning. Canadian tourists once brought more than $20 billion annually into the U.S. economy, especially in hotspots like Florida and New York. If the U.S. doesn't roll back tariffs, fix the chaos at the border, and change its tone, this could become the new normal. And Canada isn't just a neighbor, it's an economic pillar. That pillar is now crumbling. Take Florida as an example. Canadian tourists are critical to its tourism economy. Of the 142 million visitors the state welcomed in 2024, 3.3 million were Canadians, more than 3 times the number from any other country. But now, airports like Fort Lauderdale and Orlando are reporting a 30% drop in Canadian flights. A Quebec-based travel agent specializing in Disneyland and Universal trips reported a 60% decline in bookings in just 1 month, from February to March 2025. Duty-free shops at the border are down 40% to 50% in revenue. One souvenir shop owner said he's lost 80% of his business. Tour operators like Maple Leaf Tours in Kingston have seen 30% cancellation waves. Tourist cities and border regions are suffering. In New York, hotel bookings are down 20%, with ripple effects stretching from Niagara Falls to the heart of Florida. The U.S. Travel Association warns that just a 10% drop in Canadian tourism could cost the U.S. economy $2 billion and 140,000 jobs. Based on current data, the real losses could be 3 times higher. So where's all that tourism gold going? Canadians aren't just staying home, they're spending abroad. Domestic tourism inside Canada is booming, and Europe is seeing a surge. Air Canada is increasing flights to Paris, Rome, and Frankfurt. WestJet is adding routes to Dublin and London. Mexico, Jamaica, and the Caribbean are also breaking records for Canadian arrivals. Flair Airlines reports surging demand to these destinations. And this isn't just about vacations. It affects business ties, student exchanges, and global influence. Fewer planes flying to the U.S. means fewer international connections. Meanwhile, countries like China, Turkey, and Qatar are deepening ties with Europe and Asia, bypassing the U.S. entirely. This is no longer a warning bell. It's a serious wake-up call. America is losing its connection to the world. And the longer this trend continues, the harder it will be to rebuild the bridges that are being burned. So stay informed, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next video.